All right, today we are going to make a end table out of spalted box elder and epoxy. So the first thing we want to do is clean up the slab. So that means remove all the bark, any rotted wood. Okay, here I am cleaning up the edges with a wire brush. And then we can see the result here. Nice clean edge, no bark, no debris, nothing that's going to mess up our epoxy pour later. And then for this project, I'm going to cut the slab in half and make 2 end tables. So just doing a little bit of cleanup with this Japanese pole saw here. And then the next thing I wanted to do was make the melamine form that's going to hold the slab and I'm going to actually pour the epoxy into. And so in this part, I didn't have my track saw quite yet. So we just did it on the ground using rulers and a circular saw. And then I went ahead and measured the slab to make sure that the sides for the mold were high enough so we don't have epoxy spilling out all over the place later. Went ahead and dry fitted everything, make sure things were looking good. And then I started putting together the form with the caulking. And you would think, in theory, that it would be very easy just to make a square box. But when you get all this caulking involved, for some reason, everything wants to swirl around on you, and it's a huge pain in the butt to keep it all square, level, not get caulking all over yourself, all over the workshop. All right, once that was done, I will use the world's tiniest brush here to seal the slab. And this is to keep air from escaping from the wood during the curing process, which would then add a bunch of bubbles into our epoxy project, which we would not enjoy. And clearly I need to invest in a much bigger paintbrush for the next project. All right, once that's done and everything's dried, I went ahead and scuffed everything up real good so there'll be a good mechanical bond between the fresh epoxy we're going to be pouring into the mold later and this epoxy here that's dried on the slab. And I went ahead and put some mold release in here so this wouldn't stick. But as you'll see in a minute, I might as well not even bothered. But we have high aspirations at this point in the video. And then what I wanted to do here was level the mold so we didn't end up with, like a half an inch of epoxy on one end higher than the other. So I put a couple shims on there, got it level. And then I also don't want the wood floating around once I pour all that epoxy in there. So we go ahead and clamp it into the mold, or the form I should say, so that it doesn't move around once we start pouring that epoxy in on top of it. And here we are mixing up our epoxy. And then the camera is freaking out a little bit here. It doesn't know quite what to focus on. But we get this epoxy poured in here, and then you'll see in a second I get a syringe and I will suck up some of the epoxy around the edges there. Make sure it gets into any cracks or little pits or anything on the surface. And then I went around the edges with a little brush to try and get some of those extra bubbles off. And then in a second you'll see I pull out the heat gun and attempt to pop any other bubbles that are sort of rising to the surface. Okay, as I talked about earlier, you can see here in a second that this mold was absolutely stuck to that table. And I spent quite a bit of time off camera removing it, chiseling it away. It was a huge pain in the behind. See, about right here, I start to realize that like things are not going to be good. All right, so here we have the slab on the table, or on the CNC I should say, and we are flattening the surface. And you can see there on the edge there's a little bit of that form still stuck on there. And then we use the track saw, which I finally have now, thank goodness, to cut off the edges and make them nice and square. I was doing several light cuts. Alright, so here's the end result. And then the next thing we need to do is put the under bevel on. So I am measuring that and getting the track saw all set up to make those cuts. And here is the result of that. You can see there's a little piece we'll take care of later. Alright, next I filled in all the little pits and voids at the top. And then here I am putting the finish on. And then we were going ahead and put in the inserts to attach the legs. And then this honestly is the best part of the whole project. You can finally see like all the results of the work. Or of course it can also be terrifying because maybe this is where you see all the mistakes. And we didn't drop it on the concrete, so that's good. And here it is, all finished. So thank you so much for watching, and please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments, I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great one. Bye-bye.